with reporters from the AP about Paul Manafort's case before joining the Russia investigation. Plus, we have a big follow-up tonight on our exclusive reporting about how the Clinton bought and paid for phony fake Russian dossier was actually used to obtain FISA warrants to spy on, well, then candidate and then President-elect Donald Trump and his campaign. This scandal is unprecedented in American history, and we're only tonight scratching the surface. We'll explain. Plus, President Trump is now reacting and raising new questions about the corrupt Russia investigation. We have a deep dive on this dirty dossier you will not see anywhere else. Also tonight, 60 Minutes correspondent Lara Logan. She is here with a preview of her exclusive report on the war in Afghanistan. You must watch that. But first, our opening monologue with a lot of breaking news. All right, the evidence of corruption and bias inside Special Counsel Mueller's team, it just keeps piling up. Now, it does get complicated. I promise we'll go step by step. We'll break it all down for you tonight. But breaking right now, Sara Carter, investigative reporter, is now telling us that the top investigator, the guy we've been telling you about, Andrew Weissman, he met with journalists from the AP last April to discuss the news outlet's investigation into Paul Manafort. Now, the next day, the AP published a major expose about Paul Manafort and alleged money laundering. And sources are telling Sara Carter that the AP reporters in that meeting, they were actually promising to share documents and other information about Manafort with the Department of Justice. There's going to be a lot of news in coming weeks about the media and the role they're playing in all of this. Now, tonight, the AP is denying it, saying it's categorically untrue. Now, at the time of this conversation, Weissman was the head of the Justice Department's fraud division and would then go on a short time later to join Mueller's team the following month. And according to the report, Weissman notified his superiors about the sit-down with the AP, and during that time, he wasn't working for the Manafort case, and he didn't have access to any documents related to it. Now, this shows that Weissman had prejudice going into the investigation against Paul Manafort. Now, that's on top of his troubling history. Remember, Weissman, he led the highly controversial obstruction of justice case, remember, against Arthur Andersen accounting in the Enron scandal? Remember, he destroyed that company. Tens of thousands of people lost their job. That verdict was later overturned in a Supreme Court unanimous 9-0 ruling. Now, Weissman also put 4 Merrill executives in jail for a year. Those convictions were also overturned, in that case by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. This is why we have to question the decision of making Robert Mueller. Why would he make these appointments of people like Weissman and only Democratic donors? Why, given this history, was he ever appointed? And why would Mueller fill that team with people that gave money to Hillary Clinton, the DNC, over $50,000 to candidates like this, and Barack Obama? Also, a big follow-up tonight to our exclusive reporting last night on the Clinton bought and paid for phony fake news Russian propaganda dossier with all that salacious material that we have confirmed was used by the Obama administration to literally surveil members of the Trump campaign team and, of course, then President-elect Donald Trump and members of his team. Now, we have been all over this story from the beginning, and just to give you an idea of just how serious this is, a source is telling me this is going to all be proven right. To quote him, Hannity, you're way over the target at low altitude. And everyone else in the destroyed Trump media will be proven so wrong on so many levels. He said you can't even imagine how bad this is going to get. Now, in addition to the phony dossier being used to spy on members of the Trump campaign, Sara Carter is also reporting, and we have confirmed this, that information about systemic FISA abuse will also be exposed soon, maybe as early as next week. Now, surveilling the Trump campaign isn't the only incident. It goes way beyond that. This is the real Russia scandal the media has never reported on. And it has nothing to do with what the fake news media has been spoon-feeding the entire country for the past year about Trump-Russia collusion. It doesn't exist. There's no evidence. Even top Democrats have been telling us, but nobody listens. And they still keep reporting it anyway. Unimaginable. Take a look.
Well, the allegation, of course, is that the Russians in the hacking and dumping of documents in the election had essentially relationships with Trump campaign people. But I'm not prepared to say that there's proof you could take to a jury.
Do you agree with this conclusion that the president has reached, that there was no evidence of collusion?
We haven't seen any of that whatsoever, George. We've been looking and showing everything that they possibly have. That has not led to that.
The last time we spoke, Senator, I asked you if you had actually seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and you said to me, and I'm quoting you now, you said, not at this time. Has anything changed since we spoke last?
Well, no, it hasn't.
I know we need to go soon, but just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet.
No, it has not been.
Okay.
No, not yet. Now, instead, the real collusion involves Hillary Clinton and the DNC spending millions of dollars trying to influence an election by funding all of this salacious Russian-sourced dossier that the Obama administration then used to spy on an opposition party in a presidential election year. President Trump himself reacting to all of this by tweeting, disproven and paid for by Democrats dossier used to spy on Trump campaign. Did FBI use intel tool to influence the election? At Fox and Friends, did Dems or Clinton also pay Russians? Where are hidden and smashed DNC servers? He's asking questions. Where are crooked Hillary's emails? What a mess. By the way, it's only getting bigger. Now, the president raises some very constitutional questions here. There's so much about this dossier that we still don't know about. But here's what we do know. And we're going to break this down and dissect this entire scandal so that everybody understands it. Even fake news CNN, they may understand how serious this really is. Let's go back to October 2015. The Washington Free Beacon, they paid Fusion GPS to do standard political op research on then candidate Donald Trump. It had nothing to do with Russian sources. Christopher Steele was not involved at all, the MI6 agent. Then in April of last year, when it was clear that Trump would be the Republican nominee back in 2016, Hillary Clinton and the DNC that Donna Brazile said that Hillary Clinton controlled, especially the money, took over the funding of the project. All told, they would pay Fusion GPS over $10 million through a law firm. By the way, the DNC, Hillary's campaign, they used the same law firm. And the former British spy, Christopher Steele, then at that point, when the Democrats are paying him, Hillary's paying him, he gets involved in June of that year. Now, keep in mind, according to Vanity Fair, Steele has paid Russian sources over the years as part of his, quote, job. And during that summer, Steele quickly goes to work using current and former Russian government sources to produce what we now know is the phony fake news dossier that included the salacious and completely false information, including Donald Trump in Russia at the Ritz-Carlton, Moscow, with hookers urinating on beds. Wow. Now, keep in mind, former FBI Director James Comey, he even testified under oath that the contents of the dossier were unverified. Well, that apparently did not stop Steele from reportedly briefing news outlets, let's see, like the New York Times, the Washington Post, Yahoo News, the New Yorker, and fake news CNN, all about the dossier. Now, that means Steele was trying to influence an election with a dossier that Clinton paid for. Of course, Clinton wanted this. Then fast forward, November 28th, according to reporter David Kramer, an ally of Senator John McCain, he meets with Steele. Steele agrees to give him a copy of the dossier to give McCain, which Kramer does. Then in early 2016, McCain then gives the dossier to the FBI Director James Comey. See how it's now tying together? And in January of last year, BuzzFeed, well, they decided to publish this fake news document that President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, just this week is now suing over for defamation. Now, here's where it gets shocking. According to reports, during the summer of 2016, former Trump campaign associate, remember Carter Page, he spied on. They used a FISA warrant. And we found out from other reporting that former Trump campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, he was surveilled before and after the election. And now, thanks to Sara Carter and John Solomon and others, we have confirmed tonight this new information through 3 separate sources. We started it last night. The Clinton-funded, unverified dossier with all that salacious material and Russia propaganda, that was used as a justification to obtain FISA warrants to spy on members of the Trump campaign and then the president-elect. And we're learning more about the dossier from the very guy who helped create it, because Senator Dianne Feinstein released his congressional testimony. Now, Feinstein's excuse for doing it is pretty lame, pretty unbelievable. She told NBC News today that the reason that she released the information and the exchange with Congress is because, well, she had a bad cold and the dog ate my homework, and that slowed down her mental abilities. Wow, really? So what Feinstein did is a major breach of trust with Senate investigators, but actually, it provided some very revealing information. Let's give you some. All right, Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS. All right, during that testimony, that he said he never even bothered to verify. What? Not even bother to verify what Steele brought him from his Russian sources, and that he was against Donald Trump during the election. Shocking. And we also know that Simpson remember, he met with the Russian lawyer both before and after the meeting at Trump Tower. Remember the one with Don Jr. and Manafort and Jared Kushner in June of 2016? Oh, we're really supposed to believe that Glenn Simpson, who hates Trump, who never verified the dossier, that it's a mere coincidence that he's meeting with this Russian, as he testified to? And Simpson also met with former top DOJ official, member Bruce Orr. Now tying that together. And Orr's wife, Nellie, actually worked for Fusion GPS. I know this is a lot of information. Let me explain exactly what this all means. Clinton bought and paid for this phony dossier, this lie, this propaganda. She was hoping the Russian propaganda and lies would influence the general election. The Obama administration then politicized, and as I've been warning about, weaponized these powerful tools that we give our intelligence community, and they use them to go after an opposition party in a presidential election year. So we have Clinton putting the fix in. Remember Bernie Sanders? We learned, Donna Brazile, fix was in the primary. It was done. Done deal. Bernie, you had no shot. The fix was also in. Think about this with the Clintons. With the exoneration before the investigation in her email server scandal. Remember, it was Comey and Peter Strzok? They were writing a letter of exoneration. They didn't even investigate yet. And then she here was trying to use the dossier to fix the general election. So what is being exposed are massive abuses of our constitutional and civil liberties, our Fourth Amendment rights and protections against unreasonable search and seizure. And this is now reaching a point that you can't even imagine. Top officials at the highest levels of your government, they're all involved. They will be exposed. Now, we have so much more on all of this. Joining us now with reaction is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Clinton Cash, Peter Schweitzer, Fox News contributor Sara Carter, and also Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. All right. I want to get into the Weissman thing first. Then I want to go back to yesterday's news, Sara, if possible. Let's start with Weissman.
Well, what we have here, Sean, is basically two different stories. Now, one of the stories coming from sources is that Andrew Weissman was contacted by the AP. The AP wanted to meet with him, and they went to have this meeting at the DOJ on April 11th. And at this meeting, they were apparently going to share documents and information with Weissman and the other attendees at the meeting. But just before coming on the show, I spoke with a source familiar with this issue. Now, remember, the AP is categorically denying this claim that they were going to share any information with Weissman whatsoever. And I got a call just before coming on your show with a source familiar with that meeting and said there were 5 AP reporters attending that meeting, that the reporters did not bring anything in with them whatsoever, no documents. They shared nothing with them. And in fact, the source said that there was a telephone call actually placed by one of the AP reporters on April 8th to Andrew Weissman saying, look, we're not going to share any documentation with you. We're not going to give you anything that we have on Paul Manafort.
Where's the recusal? Isn't he compromised? Isn't he prejudiced?
Well, this is the question. Why would he then lie about this, right? If this is the story coming from on Weissman's side, why? According to some of the sources that I've spoken with, there was a problem. He had set up this meeting without the appropriate procedures in place. He didn't call the people that he needed to call to have come into this meeting. So there's a lot of concern here.
If I'm Paul Manafort's attorneys, and this is all unraveling like this,
right? You file a motion to dismiss
immediately,
which forces the judge to haul Weissman in front of the judge and say, account for yourself what happened in
Why
this
didn't
meeting.
he recuse himself, Greg?
Well, he should have. In fact, he should have been fired. I'm looking right in front of me at the Department of Justice regulations. DOJ will not comment about an ongoing investigation. If you do, you're fired. If he gives information or collects information either way from these reporters, he should be fired.
Unbelievable.
I got off the phone or communicated via email with a former DOJ official who was there for more than 10 years. He said, absolutely, Manafort's lawyer should now file a motion to dismiss.
And with 4% in D.C. voting for Trump, they need a change of venue if we have any fairness in our criminal justice system. I'm sorry, Paul Manafort cannot get a fair
And in fact, Manafort's lawyers have already filed a lawsuit.
All right. We got so many moving parts here. Peter Schweitzer, let me get to you. So Hillary, the fix is in with Bernie. The fix is in with Comey and Strzok, exoneration before investigation. She pays for the dossier. She tries to use Russian lies to influence the general election. And then that same dossier is used to get FISA warrants against a candidate and a president-elect. It's based on faulty propaganda lies that she paid for. You cannot make this up in the worst spy novel or most imaginative spy novel I could ever think of.
Sean, this has got to go down as one of the great, if not the greatest, dirty trick in American political history. Because look at what they accomplished with this, or tried to accomplish with this. For this investment with Fusion GPS, they wanted to try to influence the media, which they did. There were all these stories coming out about the FBI's looking around and, Trump's Russian ties in this area of collusion. You also basically got the FBI to take an unsourced document. Keep this in mind. This is very important. Fusion GPS, in Glenn Simpson's testimony, he says, we do open source research. That's what we're known for. That's what we do. There was no open source information in this dossier at all. And that's why Glenn Simpson didn't confirm any of it, because he knew, I think, that there was nothing to it. It was a disinformation campaign.
Like Strzok and Page had an agenda, like Comey had an agenda, and like so many others had an agenda. Sara, let's go back to the... All right, you broke the story with John Solomon on this program about warrants at Trump Tower before anybody else. I think it was in March?
Yeah.
Of last year?
It was in March. Yeah, okay. March of last year.
Right here on this program. Now, the question, now that we know that the dossier was used, I am getting conflicting reports. It was used in some capacity, and it was used in a significant way to get the warrants.
Well, I think, Sean, this is why we need to really have this investigation be made public before the American people. I mean, the House Intelligence Committee is looking into the dossier. The Senate Judiciary Committee is looking at this. We need those answers. I have been told the same. It played a partial role in getting those warrants. It played a significant role in getting those warrants. What we need to know is the truth.
Significant is the word I keep hearing.
Yes, what role did it play? And if it was not verified, and I agree with Peter, look, this dossier...
Did they knowingly lie to a court, the FISA court? Did they knowingly give lies to obtain warrants against a political opponent? Because that makes Watergate basically look like kindergarten compared to this.
Yeah, if they did, yes, it would make it look like, yeah, kindergarten compared to this. But what we need to know is what are in those FBI witness files. What is
Release
it that the House Intelligence
I want to see
Committee?
It. The public. President Trump being criticized for a comment he made during an immigration meeting, apparently with lawmakers. Ed Henry tonight has a full report, but first, in a shocking revelation, MSNBC's wonderful couple, Joe and Mika, actually admitted on Katie Couric's podcast that I never heard of that the mainstream media is anti-Trump. Listen to this.
Do you think the coverage of Donald Trump has overcorrected? That is, do you think...
Yes.
Totally. I mean, we're over our skis, and it's going to hurt us.
Well, yes, we've overstepped. We're over our skis.
Totally.
We are not we, the entire mainstream media, we are reflexively anti-Trump on all things.
Wow, maybe this is what Joe and Mika are referring to, because they're probably talking about themselves. They just add a touch. Take a look.
One of people closest to Donald Trump during the campaign saying he's got early stage of dementia. He repeats the same stories over and over again. His father had it, and it's getting worse, and not a single person who works for him doesn't know he has early signs of dementia.
This is so unbalanced. This is so, he is not well. He looked like a thug. He looked like a goon. You look at the handshake. You look at this. Just what a thug! What an embarrassment! Look, he's mauling him like an idiot.
They see no talent. They see absolutely nothing behind the eyes that they can work with.
This is not funny. This is really bad. Just for the record, we're all really nervous.
This presidency is rotten all the way to the core and right to the top.
Totally unprepared for the job of being president, unfortunately not knowing what he does not know.
And possibly unfit mentally. Sorry.
Here with reaction, former White House press secretary, Fox News contributor Ari Fleischer, and from the Hill, Joe Concha is with us. The media tonight, let's start about the president's comments about immigration from countries. Your reaction and the media's reaction to it.
Unforced error by the president, right? Because he has this great economic message that this steps on. Now, if you watch the other cable news networks, this is wall to wall. And look, the thing is, though, the selective outrage.
By the way, the same people that don't cover a thing about what we're discussing, about the dossier, those people?
Yeah.
The lazy people, the overpaid people, those ones?
Selective outrage in this case, Sean, is fascinating to me because this is the same person that Donald Trump has been publicly for 40 years. This is how he speaks. He's inelegant, yes. He's unfiltered, yes. But what people like about him so much is that he's authentic, warts and all. So even when he says things like this, I followed this on social media, I don't think one Trump supporter jumps to the other side because of this comment. They come to expect these things. I don't agree with what he said, but at the same time, this is who he is.
Did liberal Joe stumble on the truth for a second on Katie Couric's so popular podcast, Ari Fleischer?
Oh, he sure did. And you know, Sean, the press has been for decades anti-Republican. They were vehemently anti-Bush, and they're triple vehemently anti-Donald Trump. Let me give you 4 facts that I went and looked up tonight about the media. Number 1, Columbia Journalism Review did a study on who gave money from journalism to the candidates in 2016. Journalists gave $380,000 to Hillary Clinton, $16,000 to Donald Trump. 96% of journalists' contributions to Hillary Clinton. 2, when George Bush was president, the New York Times took a poll of 153 journalists to ask who would make a better president. By 3-to-1, reporters from outside the Beltway said Kerry. By 12-to-1, reporters from inside the Beltway said John Kerry over George Bush. Remember, it just got revealed recently. New York Times reporter Linda Greenhouse, who covers the Supreme Court, acknowledged she's a longtime donor to Planned Parenthood. And finally, Atlantic Magazine did a story. 24 journalists, working journalists, not columnists, not editorial writers, working journalists, left journalism to go into the Obama administration. It was a very short step from journalism into the Obama administration. You'll be lucky if there's 3, 4, 5 reporters that go into the Trump administration.
There's never any...
The bias is deep. It's been there for decades.
Did liberal Joe stumble on the truth for once?
Well, look, it's probably Morning Joe is the most anti-Trump show on television. That's saying something in this environment, but let's define anti-Trump. Are they criticizing policy? Hardly ever. Or cabinet selections,
he was
judicial
saying the other
appointments.
day that he had an expert, and I guess the Washington Post or wherever he was going to write some article, that they wouldn't publish his source that said that the president was suffering early stages of dementia.
Right. So he wanted to include in a Washington Post op-ed that he writes for the paper sometimes that the president has dementia. The problem for our many in our media is that they try to play Doogie Howser or Dr. Melfi, and the Washington Post in this case said no, because they said you can't make a specific medical diagnosis on a specific condition based on one unnamed source who isn't a doctor. Good for them. But back to Joe and Mika, based on your montage, it's not based on policy, the criticism. It's Mean Girls every day. Mean Girls is a movie about high school girls. The difference is that the hosts of Morning Joe are adults in their 50s. We need to raise the discourse in this country.
The adult part may be a little questionable. Let me go back to the whole comment to Ari Fleischer. Was the president just inarticulate in discussing merit-based immigration?
Look, what the president said is hurtful. I wish he hadn't said that. It's just wrong. You don't talk like that as president. Now, look, Lyndon Baines Johnson talked like that all the time. Maybe other presidents have talked like that. In the modern world where these things get communicated, it hurts our relations with these nations, and I think it hurts the cause of getting an agreement to build the wall and to deal with the DACA and get a comprehensive immigration reform along the lines the president's proposing. So I regret that he said it. But I don't look at it from the political point of view. Will it hurt him with the base? No, I don't think it will. But I do look at it as a governing point of view. When you're the president, you should be more mindful of the messages you're sending, and that was the right message.
Guys, thank you for being with us. We have so much more to report tonight. When we come back, a 60 Minutes exclusive on the situation in Afghanistan. We'll talk exclusively with Lara Logan. That's next. Following major national security stories out of Washington tonight, joining us live, he is in D.C. with the very latest, is Fox News Chief National Correspondent, our buddy Ed Henry. Sir, a lot going on tonight.
That's right, Sean. Breaking tonight, some big decisions coming from President Trump on two big national security challenges. First, on North Korea. Remember all the heat he took for his tough rhetoric, calling dictator Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man. Critics said this would make a bad situation worse, but the president's approach has now led the North Koreans to try and calm tensions by agreeing to send a delegation to the Winter Olympics in South Korea. And now the president is showing he might be flexible as well, telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. I have relationships with people. I think you people are surprised by all of this. Pressed on whether he has spoken with Kim Jong-un, he added, I don't want to comment on it. I'm not saying I have or haven't. I just don't want to comment. Meanwhile, top officials at the White House say they're deeply concerned about reports that the regime in Iran has arrested thousands of protesters and tortured and killed some of those protesters. This comes as Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin hinted at a potential compromise on the controversial Iran nuclear deal. The president tomorrow could again waive some economic sanctions against Iran to keep the U.S. in compliance with that 2015 pact negotiated by the Obama administration. But the president could also announce a new round of sanctions targeting people and businesses inside Iran, following his announcement in October that he was refusing to certify that Iran was in compliance of the deal without scrapping it altogether. Basically, he's trying to show the U.S. is still keeping the heat on Tehran. Finally, back here at home, the volatile issue of immigration got very explosive today. Fox News has confirmed that in an Oval Office meeting, the president complained about a move by lawmakers to restore protections for immigrants from various countries like El Salvador, various African countries, and Haiti as well. The president saying at one point, quote, why are we having all these people from bleep hole countries come here? Democrats like Tim Kaine tonight calling this a big embarrassment. White House aides are saying this is a president who speaks bluntly and is focused on creating a merit-based immigration system that will focus on helping the American people is about that and not about helping foreign countries. That's their explanation tonight, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry in Washington tonight. Thank you. 16 years after 9/11, the U.S. continues to fight radical Islamic terrorists in Afghanistan. The conflict there has been America's longest war on record. Thousands of Americans have been killed, nearly 2,500, and it has cost over $1 trillion. 60 Minutes this Sunday will air a full report on the current situation, and they gave us an exclusive preview. Now, watch this clip of 60 Minutes correspondent Lara Logan describing what it is like for the U.S. military in Afghanistan's capital of Kabul.
A few years ago, American convoys regularly drove on the airport road below. Now the view from the helicopter window is all most on board will see of Kabul. They'll stay behind blast walls for the rest of their time in Afghanistan. We wanted to know what it says about where we are in this war if American troops can't drive 2 miles down a road in Kabul.
It's a country at war, and it's a capital that is under attack by a determined enemy.
No U.S. general has spent more time here than John Nicholson, the commander of American forces in Afghanistan.
We do everything possible to protect our forces. So protecting,
You're not using the roads.
Protecting the lives of our troops is our number one priority. If we can fly instead of drive, and that offers them a greater degree of safety, then it's the prudent and the right thing to do.
In military terms, that's called surrendering the terrain.
I disagree. I think it's answering our moral imperative to protect the lives of our soldiers and civilians. So that's what we do.
60 Minutes correspondent Lara Logan is with us now. So good to see you.
Thank you.
You're like Sarah Carter. You spent 20 years in more than 2 decades in war zones. You were CBS's chief foreign correspondent in 2006, chief foreign affairs correspondent in 2008. You're still going back to these war zones. Why is this such a passion of yours?
Why is it such a passion? Because I believe in it. I believe that it's important that we go out on the end of the line to the places that some people might not want to go or be able to go, and we hold our leaders and ourselves accountable for the decisions that we make.
Mm-hmm. But you do put yourself at risk when you do this. You know, I remember how awful. Well, we watched what happened in Tahrir Square, and I remember what you said at the time when you spoke about it. You said, in a moment, everything went wrong. And I know it broke my heart and a lot of people's hearts about what was happening to you, but that's the environment. You're still throwing yourself back into those environments.
Which should tell you that
tough.
you don't do it for the adrenaline, right? If it costs you that much, you have to do it because it's that important to you. And it's sort of like you, right? I feel this is the reason I was put on this earth. You know, I want to be the best mother I can be. That's so important to me. But this is like breathing for me. It's why I was born.
That's an amazing commitment to what you think your life's purpose is. So we're 16 years later. In this interview that will air on 60 Minutes on Sunday, you do talk to the U.S. commander in Afghanistan. You also talk to the Afghan president. What are they telling you 16 years later?
Well, you know, General Nicholson has a tough job. So does President Ghani. And I say that with the utmost respect for what both of them are dealing with. And it's our job to be tough. And I was really tough. And to their, well, especially General Nicholson, you know, to his credit, he didn't dodge a single question. And he's been there longer than any other U.S. general. And he's served a number of times. And he's very, very committed to this. Mm-hmm. But his, you know, to some degree, he's facing an overwhelming challenge. So he wouldn't like that, though. He thinks he can win.
Well, he actually, in the interview with you, he actually says that it's more important than ever that we win, that we beat Islamic militant terror. We need to defeat the ideology. And he said if we lose here, or if we were to leave here, the cost would be unacceptable. Explain what he was actually saying there, because the president gave him 3,000 more troops.
Well, I said to him, you know, Americans are more concerned about a guy going to rent a truck from Home Depot than they are about terrorists coming from Afghanistan to attack. And he said, that's exactly the point, is if you lose here, you embolden the guys who are going to Home Depot. Mm-hmm. And in his view, that's what makes it so important to defeat the ideology, because the ideology is what drives every attack on any part of the planet. And what's the one thing, Sean, that has never changed and that every single one of them share? Doesn't matter if it's Timbuktu or Paris or New York. They share the exact same ideology.
And that's why it just bothered me so much. I won't drag you into politics when the president oversees contingency operations, man-caused disasters, the mysterious reluctance and resistance to say radical Islamic terrorism, like the commander is telling you. We have made tremendous progress. I want to get your perspective, having been over there so many times. Did the rules of engagement now being changed to let the commanders on the ground and the troops on the ground make the decision, is that responsible for the last year, the degrading of ISIS that we have seen so dramatically?
Are you talking now about Afghanistan or beyond
I'm
Syria
talking
and Iraq?
Generally speaking, because they're mostly pushed out of Iraq, but we still have, we're dealing with terrorism. Obviously, it's a worldwide problem.
Well, the Iraqis said just this week that there are at least 3,000 ISIS terrorists still operating in their country.
But far less.
Far less, yes. So any military commander will tell you that easing the rules of engagement, them having the latitude to make decisions on the ground is hugely significant. There's always more factors involved, but in my experience, I pay a lot of attention to what these people say and to what they do. And they very often tell you, they telegraph for you their intentions. And they see this as proof. The fact that they were forced out of Raqqa and they were forced out of Mosul reinforces their propaganda and their message, because it's proof that the U.S., that the rest of the world isn't going to let them have the caliphate that they deserve.
The courage of people like you and Sarah Carter, and after all you went through, to keep going back to these war zones, it's important. We're glad you do it. We'll be watching Sunday nights on 60 Minutes. Thank you, Lara, for stopping by. When we come back, you won't believe the vile homophobic rant from a liberal so-called comedian. Also, Tomi Lahren is here. That's straight ahead. Handler has officially now entered the realm of unhinged. Now, despite portraying herself as a champion for gay rights, the late-night host launched a vile, vicious, homophobic rant on Twitter against Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. This tweet is so graphic, so despicable. Well, we're not even going to show it to you on the program, but it's safe to say that in Chelsea's world, decency is only reserved for her liberal friends. Of course, this kind of repulsive behavior from Handler is nothing new. In December, Handler tweeted out a promo for her show featuring a mean-spirited parody of White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Here with reaction, Fox News contributor Tomi Lahren is with us. You know, Tomi, here's the thing. I'm not going to call for her firing, boycott. I don't do it for Bill Maher, that idiot Stephen Colbert. I don't care what people say. Everyone has the power to change the channel. But if we say something that is deemed as conservatives inappropriate, they want our head on a chopping block, then begins the boycotts, then begins the silencing. What's your reaction?
Well, we have to point out the hypocrisy, especially to individuals like Chelsea Handler, who continue to display this pattern. And you know what? I got to tell you, Sean, I am so sick of these Hollywood liberals who sit at their award shows and they're pearl clutching and they're talking about speaking your truth, Me Too, time's up there for everyone. And then they tweet crap like this that's disgusting and vile. And yet we're supposed to buy this whole charade that they're these wonderful, moral people. No, not falling for it.
All right, let me show a little bit. You actually debated her. And I remember reading about it at the time. Let's remind people a little bit about what happened.
I do believe that he's a good president. I do believe that he's done things. And people talk about all the time, it's, well, he tweeted something, and that's mean. I can get over the meanness of his tweets if he's helping middle-class Americans, if he's helping America, if he's putting America first, if he's strengthening us on the world stage, if he's enforcing our border. I can deal with a mean tweet.
But why? But mean represents so many other things. He's kind of like a toddler, like an angry, he's a toddler. He lashes out at people and he's vengeful and he says really nasty things.
What is she saying? She's acting like a toddler.
Well, of course she is. She's also the person that organized the Women's March, the Pink Hat March at Sundance Film Festival last year. This woman, although I did have a decent conversation with her, since then, she's just gone off the deep end. I don't know if it's because she lost her show at Netflix or she doesn't know what she's doing now. She wants to be an activist. I don't know, but I thought that she was at least somewhat level-headed, and I used to think she was funny. But she's like the rest of these so-called comedians. They inject politics that they don't understand, they know nothing about, into their acts, and then not only are they not funny, they're disgusting, and yet they get away with it because they're on the left, as usual.
What did you think of her personally?
Personally, I have to be honest with you, Sean, she was very kind to me. She was respectful. We had a good conversation. I can't say the same about other liberals that I've debated or shared the stage with, but she was very nice to me, and she seemed
what
actually
other big
open.
liberals? I didn't know you were doing that.
Oh, boy, Trevor Noah, Bill Maher, all the ladies of The View. I mean, let's join the list. I was just in West Hollywood earlier today talking to a bunch of the loving and tolerant left. I put myself in these situations because I hope for a productive conversation. I think I had one with Chelsea, but my goodness, that doesn't mean I'm not going to rip her apart for what she's doing on Twitter, because I find it disgusting, I find it hypocritical, and she needs to be called out.
All right, we look forward to the next Tomi Lahren Hits the Road. We'll show it right here on Hannity. Tomi, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. Coming up next, we have your depraved Hannity hotline calls. It's getting worse every day, and a shocking undercover video you do not want to miss from James O'Keefe, Project Veritas.
If you have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis,
with reporters from the AP about Paul Manafort's case before joining the Russia investigation. Plus, we have a big follow-up tonight on our exclusive reporting about how the Clinton bought and paid for phony fake Russian dossier was actually used to obtain FISA warrants to spy on, well, then candidate and then President-elect Donald Trump and his campaign. This scandal is unprecedented in American history, and we're only tonight scratching the surface. We'll explain. Plus, President Trump is now reacting and raising new questions about the corrupt Russia investigation. We have a deep dive on this dirty dossier you will not see anywhere else. Also tonight, 60 Minutes correspondent Lara Logan. She is here with a preview of her exclusive report on the war in Afghanistan. You must watch that. But first, our opening monologue with a lot of breaking news. All right, the evidence of corruption and bias inside Special Counsel Mueller's team, it just keeps piling up. Now, it does get complicated. I promise we'll go step by step. We'll break it all down for you tonight. But breaking right now, Sara Carter, investigative reporter, is now telling us that the top investigator, the guy we've been telling you about, Andrew Weissman, he met with journalists from the AP last April to discuss the news outlet's investigation into Paul Manafort. Now, the next day, the AP published a major expose about Paul Manafort and alleged money laundering. And sources are telling Sara Carter that the AP reporters in that meeting, they were actually promising to share documents and other information about Manafort with the Department of Justice. There's going to be a lot of news in coming weeks about the media and the role they're playing in all of this. Now, tonight, the AP is denying it, saying it's categorically untrue. Now, at the time of this conversation, Weissman was the head of the Justice Department's fraud division and would then go on a short time later to join Mueller's team the following month. And according to the report, Weissman notified his superiors about the sit-down with the AP, and during that time, he wasn't working for the Manafort case, and he didn't have access to any documents related to it. Now, this shows that Weissman had prejudice going into the investigation against Paul Manafort. Now, that's on top of his troubling history. Remember, Weissman, he led the highly controversial obstruction of justice case, remember, against Arthur Andersen accounting in the Enron scandal. Remember, he destroyed that company. Tens of thousands of people lost their job. That verdict was later overturned in a Supreme Court unanimous 9-0 ruling. Now, Weissman also put 4 Merrill executives in jail for a year. Those convictions were also overturned, in that case by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. This is why we have to question the decision of making Robert Mueller. Why would he make these appointments of people like Weissman and only Democratic donors? Why, given this history, was he ever appointed? And why would Mueller fill that team with people that gave money to Hillary Clinton, the DNC, over $50,000 to candidates like this, and Barack Obama? Also, a big follow-up tonight to our exclusive reporting last night on the Clinton bought and paid for phony fake news Russian propaganda dossier with all that salacious material that we have confirmed was used by the Obama administration to literally surveil members of the Trump campaign team and, of course, then President-elect Donald Trump and members of his team. Now, we have been all over this story from the beginning, and just to give you an idea of just how serious this is, a source is telling me this is going to all be proven right. To quote him, Hannity, you're way over the target at low altitude. And everyone else in the Destroy Trump media will be proven so wrong on so many levels. He said you can't even imagine how bad this is going to get. Now, in addition to the phony dossier being used to spy on members of the Trump campaign, Sara Carter is also reporting, and we have confirmed this, that information about systemic FISA abuse will also be exposed soon, maybe as early as next week.